Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel.
So you're joining me on this vlog today outside my new office. So I'm renting it off of my daughter that's at a reasonable rate. Unfortunately though, one of the terms and conditions of rental was that I needed to leave all of her garden toys in there at the same time. So hence obviously why I'm outside of it on this bright evening. So apologies if it's too bright and I'm obviously slightly overexposed, but making the most of this lovely sunset to do obviously this piece of camera today rather than obviously sat in the office. But yeah, it's good subject today is talking about star trails in an urban area, and hopefully you enjoy it as well. So in today's vlog I wanted to talk about urban astrophotography. It's something, a little project I wanted to do for some time now. I've taken star trail images before on some very remote and dark locations, but due to obviously lockdown, that's not necessarily going to be the case at the moment. And I was wanting obviously to do it. There was a couple of weeks ago now, we had some really clear skies, and luckily enough I was able to sort of get out for about an hour and a half to 2 hours and take multiple images of the star trails. And it's a really tricky thing that I wanted to do because of the location of where I live. Obviously only being able to venture no further than the back garden meant that I needed to obviously take into consideration the huge amount of light pollution that we have around this area. And I was able to produce the final image, came off really well actually, taking into consideration the light pollution that I obviously have in and around this area. So what I was able to do with the camera, this is obviously the 600D, obviously using the 77D to record this on, but I had the 18 to 185 lens on, set at 18mm and at f3.5, which is the widest aperture that this lens allows me. Now, to take into consideration about the actual light pollution was the consideration regarding the ISO. Now, personally I would have loved to have pushed the ISO a lot higher to then obviously get different colours within the actual star trails. But due to obviously the light pollution, I only kept the ISO at 200. Now, when I was actually taking the images, I was a little bit apprehensive until I actually post-processed the images and found that even at that ISO, I was still able to produce some really interesting details within the star trails. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to do with the actual composition is look at something that was static within the star trails. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have loved, obviously, just with the pole star and obviously the rotation of the stars around the pole star would have been fantastic. But adding that extra element and that extra detail and interest within the composition worked out really well. Now, luckily, my next door neighbour has got one of these fantastic sort of palm trees as such, and it's working out to be a really interesting composition. Having the palm tree down in the bottom right hand corner and the pole star up in the top left hand corner meant that I was able to get the full rotation of the star trails, but also add a little bit more interest and a little bit more detail within the image as well. Now, focusing can be really hard when you're trying to do star trails. Luckily enough, what I was able to do is light the tree itself using a torch, take the focus from that, and then obviously switch the lens over to the manual focus, and that was obviously not letting the lens then hunt around all the time for focusing. And the second thing that I was able to do and worked out really well is having a cable release attached to the actual camera. Now, this cable release that I've actually got has the ability to actually, once you press the shutter button, actually keep the shutter open. And I had the camera set up, as I say, on 18mm f3.5 ISO 200 and 30-second exposures. I then obviously kept the shutter open pretty much for a full 90 minutes and then obviously was able to then blend the images together in total. Now it worked out to be about 166 images in total that I was able to blend, and having that multiple exposures meant that I was able to blend them really well using Photoshop in the end. One of the other considerations that I had to do was looking at when I was editing them is using obviously each layer or each image, copying and pasting them over to one of the images, and then obviously setting the blend mode, the layer mode, to lighten, to obviously then merge the images together and then create the actual star trail. What I also did for my own benefit really was to actually look at taking about 30 images, so about 15 minutes or so of images, and then obviously compiling them, saving that file, and then obviously doing another 30 images, so doing it 15-minute blocks. And the reason why I want to do that is if obviously I messed up at one point, then I hadn't ruined the whole lot, and then finally when I was left with about sort of 4 or 5 images of 15 minutes, is then obviously compiling them together to create that final star trail. What I also set the camera to do, and like I do most times, is set the camera to actually do an image in RAW as well as an image in JPEG. Now, that wasn't necessarily too much of a consideration I made at the time, it's just that that was the settings I have normally for my camera. But it worked out really quite well. So I was able to then process all of the 166 raw file images, and then obviously take that image finally, and then obviously manipulate it in obviously the camera raw process afterwards. I then also, with the final composition, took that image back into the camera raw process and increased the exposure by about 2 to 3 stops. And the reason why I wanted to do that is to actually illuminate the palm tree that little bit more, and to create that little bit more of an interest within the actual final image. So yeah, in all, the actual final composition worked out really well. But an added bonus that I was able to do using the JPEG files was then actually create a time lapse of the actual process, and that's actually worked out really quite well for about sort of a 15-16 second time lapse there, which actually really creates it, because I did try to actually set up the Canon 600D to obviously do some video in, but yeah, don't really want to look at a obviously black screen for obviously a couple of hours as I was obviously trying to take the images. But it worked out to be really quite interesting nevertheless, and something to actually show that you can really take star trail images in an really urban environment. Now obviously one of the benefits for me due to taking the star trails, but unfortunately a disadvantage for many others, and I do really feel sorry if you're in that sector, in the aviation sector, is that one of the lucky things for me is that there was no obviously light trails from any planes, and yeah, it's very upsetting, and my heart does go out to you if you are working in the aviation industry, because yeah, that's completely stopped, and very uncertain of when obviously that's going to recommence. But as I say, sort of silver lining as such for myself, I was then able to obviously capitalise on that factor and not then have to edit out multiple obviously light trails from the planes afterwards. But yeah, it's worked out to be really interesting and a good project to try out. So on the next clear evening, I'd really strongly recommend that you can, if you've got access to a garden or an outside space, you've got your camera set up on the tripod, is then obviously try to give it a go yourself. I'll obviously play the time lapse at the end as well, and obviously post the final image as well, which I'm really pleased with. But feel free to leave us a comment about it. Let us know if you've obviously tried it as well, because I really want to obviously know about how you've obviously been able to get on. If you can link into any Facebook, Flickr, Instagram pages in the comments, feel free to do that, and then obviously I and others can obviously check out your work at the same time as well. But until next time, take care.